interesting feedback for what the scope for redeveloping Toifetiki should look like. But I think critically we received different understandings of and views about what a collective impact model should and could look like, and fundamentally whether the council and the sector was able and is able to deliver this model, whether it was the right approach. We also heard a lot of views about the concerns about the state, particularly given the pandemic, a real interest in this idea of building more long-term sustainable relationships across the sector and the council. And so I think to conclude, it's fair to say we heard a range of views about the best approach to reimagine Toifetiki. Specifically, 3 options emerged from this process, and because they differed from what committee originally approved, staff carried out an options assessment, and we've provided the full options assessment as attachment A in your papers. So this assessment looked at the extent to which each option was effective, achievable, contextualised and financially viable. Based on this assessment, next slide please, Maya, council staff recommend option 2, which is the sector strategy developed by council in collaboration with the creative community. And to reiterate, the assessment led us to conclude this option is most likely to best meet the 3 shifts, consider the unique role council can play in strategy development, and that's alongside the sector asking for deeper relationships and greater involvement in the development of the strategy, and can be delivered within an existing council budget. So that's the recommendation we're putting to you today, and it's based on that options assessment. So taking this recommendation on the next slide, thank you, Maya, we have set out a snapshot of what the proposed structure for the redevelopment could look like and a bit about the process. And just to clarify here, this structure is to guide the redevelopment of Toifetiki, not necessarily the structure that will exist once the strategy is in place, and that's to be confirmed. But this process has been designed to take on board the feedback that we heard, I think the rich feedback that we heard from this engagement. So if I take each point in turn, we have Auckland Council at the top, and Auckland Council will be the ultimate owner and decision maker of the strategy. Below that is the advisory rupu. That will be membership made up of sector and council representatives, and they will help to guide the engagement process. And this model gives the sector greater representation in strategy development, and also with the intention to build trust with council. To the right of that, you've got the independent convener, so they will hold the redevelopment process and enables council to be a partner in the development. And this desire from the sector to have council as a partner in the process came through very clearly through our engagement. And then to the left of that advisory rupu, there's a political working group. And this again came through the engagement, and the group would give elected members the opportunity to input into the redevelopment and hear more directly from the sector, so via the advisory rupu and the Toi Māori working group. And it creates regular touch points and stronger connections with the sector, which I think really speaks to what came through our conversations. Underneath the advisory rupu, you'll see the Toi Māori working group. So we had a lot of calls for a by Māori, for Māori approach. And so it's expected that this group will explore how to express Te Tiriti principles in Te Ao Māori more visibly in Toifetiki, and that was one of the shifts we noted at the beginning. And also they'll explore the options and feasibility for sustaining a by Māori, for Māori approach in the arts and culture sector. And then finally, at the bottom of the diagram, you'll see this networked engagement, and the aim of this is to make sure we speak to and hear from a range of perspectives and focus with those perspectives on reimagining the vision, priorities and delivery of Toifetiki. The networked engagement will focus on a geographical spread and connect with diverse cultural groups, including rangatahi, people with disabilities and the LGBTQIA+ community. Audience voice and the 19 iwi will be included in this engagement. We can go to the next slide, I think, Maya. Thank you. This process that we've outlined will be delivered within current budgets, and the networked engagement will be designed according to available resources. But we do believe that to deliver these objectives, Council will need to and will utilise all the roles and levers available to us, and that includes leveraging funding opportunities both within the Council whānau and with strategic partners. So the next steps, if committee approve our recommendations, we would begin implementing the scope. So ngā mihi, thank you for listening. As we've taken the report as read, I will now invite questions.
Kia ora, Hannah. Tēnā kōrua, Liz. So look, I've got Councillor Walker, Pātai.
Sure. Hi, Alf. Could you just go back to the previous slide that had the relationship structure? That's the no, the next one that has the diagram of the structure. That's it. Okay. So you can hear me okay? So I've got a question by way of a suggestion, and it's based around my having seen a number of other similar processes, and it goes like this. If we accept that this approach really needs to be driven by the sector, if we accept in many respects that the sector actually has more ownership of it than the council, and I'll repeat that, the sector has more ownership than the council, even though there may be some involvement of council in terms of venues and the like. What I've seen in the past is that we have got a substantial interface with the council from a political perspective, from a top-down perspective. You can often have something that's suboptimal as far as the sector is concerned. I think it would be much better if we had something that was actually driven and owned by the sector. By all means, the parts of it that relate to council can be owned by council, but having a circumstance where it's actually owned by council and council effectively controls it is not great. My experience in a number of other strategies is that quite often various things have been dumbed down by council, either through various constraints. They could be political, they could be financial, they could be to do with a number of things. So you end up with something from the perspective of the sector that's actually suboptimal, that they don't have full ownership of. So I'm suggesting a different approach that meshes with this, but is somewhat different, so that the ownership of it, as far as council is concerned, is around our part that we do own, but the sector has its ownership and its drive, and I would suggest should actually predominate more so than council. That's my personal view, and I'm expressing that as a suggestion, but also by way of a question. Thank you. Okay,
so look, I'll go to you first, Hannah, or to Liz. I'll leave it to both of you, but from my perspective, and knowing what had happened at the original Toi Tiki and our consultation, I actually, the approach that you're showing there would be my preference, but I'll wait for you, Hannah or Liz, to end up just sort of commenting on the Pātai from Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Walker. So I think what you just shared, Councillor Walker, came through the engagement with some saying if it's to be a sector strategy, it should be devolved and established as more of a separate entity in the development of the strategy outside of council. And that was one of the three options that we reviewed in the options assessment. Alongside just a council, just for reference, just a council-owned and delivered strategy, and then this one, which is the collective strategy owned by council. And when we took it through the options assessment and looked at the criteria of effectiveness, achievability, whether it was contextualised and financially viable, that option of shifting further away from council was challenging, given the state of the sector at the moment, predominantly because of the pandemic, but also some more systemic issues that the sector agreed that we needed to respond to. So what we're suggesting through this model is that it is deeper engagement with the sector, where the focus is on really building relationships within the sector, not just with council, but also we start thinking a bit more about that our bit, your bit. So what's the role of council in here, and what's the role of sector, which I think of the sector rather, which is really important. And then on that diagram, we're really trying to respond to the need to have greater diversity of voice and sector representation when it comes to making strategic decisions. And that's why we've established the advisory raupu and the Toi Māori working group, particularly with that role of independent convener to be that touch point to allow it to feel like, well, not just to feel, to be a more sector-wide strategy. Whether or not at the end it looks different from this is to be confirmed, but given where the sector is at the moment, and if we are to deliver against those 3 shifts that were formally agreed in September, we concluded through the assessment that this was the best option at this stage.
Sure. So
Wayne,
if I can
there's
just
another,
respond,
hold
Alf,
on, Wayne.
very quickly.
No. What I'm going to do is I will get you to respond. What I want to do first is get to our pārtai, and then when we get to our whakaaro comments, I will go to you first. I just wanted to get our questions out of the way. So once we get our questions pārtai out of the way, that way at least our staff can end up sort of just being in the safe space, and then we can get to our whakaaro.
So, can I ask a supplementary question?
You can ask a supplementary question, and then you'll be the first for whakaaro.
So the supplementary question I've got is, in instances where the arts and culture community wants to have stuff that might be challenging to council, that is, that let's say they want to go further, faster, better, different around something, can that be incorporated in whatever document is produced, so that it actually reflects something that works for them? There may be parts that are less attractive to council, but my concern is that council step to one side and not actually, again, to go back to my early expression, dumb something down because there's parts of it that council is actually less keen on, and that could be for a whole variety of reasons.
Okay, Hannah, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I think absolutely is the short answer to that. The purpose of the way we're designing this approach is to make sure that it is not a council strategy. It is a strategy for the sector. And I might just add there that in a sort of more detailed scope, we have working groups that we think will establish that will fall out of the networked engagement. So around areas of critical importance to the sector that they will want to work through together. So for example, that might be about the resilience and the sustainability of the sector. And so we envisage problem solving coming through that. And by taking on this redevelopment process, I think council is committing to truly hearing from the sector and not holding it as our own. And furthermore, there were some clear challenges given back to council about the way we operate currently with our arts and culture program and strategy. So we have begun to consider the internal working groups or the internal processes we need to do to remedy that. So it's not assuming that there won't be challenging things emerging from this. But again, we think that given where the sector is right now, this is the best approach that will enable us to develop something that enhances the sector as a whole, with council as a partner, but playing that lead facilitator, or rather that lead role at the beginning, which we've heard is required.
Okay, just a further supplementary question then,
last
Mr.
one,
Chair,
Councillor. Yep,
and
last one.
And that is it possible to make this more community-driven approach clearer? And the reason I'm asking for that is that this kind of approach applies across a variety of sectors: climate change, environment, cultural, iwi, and the like, where if council actually dominates at the top, stuff gets dumbed down. And I've seen it time and time again. We need to recognise that in many instances we're actually a bit player, and we shouldn't use our position as maybe bit player but significant funder to actually constrain things on the part of a particular sector. So I'm just asking, can that be made quite clear so that people are empowered? Thank you.
So Hannah, if there's a need for comment, I'll let you comment, and then I'll go shoot to Matua Glen. Kia ora.
Thank you, Chair. That's fine. I completely agree, Councillor. So we will endeavour to make that very clear in the communications and the work that we build up from here.
Matua Glen.
Thanks, Alf.
Kia ora, Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. Karongo? Can you hear me?
Aye.
Okay, kapa. My first question, I've got two questions, or maybe three. Paragraph 62, the political working group will give local board, governing body, and independent Māori board. I'm taking that's the independent Māori statutory board. Is that correct? In 62?
That's correct.
Okay, the IMSB. Okay. Then we get down to 63. It's giving advice. The two focus areas are giving advice towards embedding Tiriti, and the other one exploring options for cause for by Māori for Māori. And then the next bullet point is about who's going to be kind of with them, or who's going to be supporting this advisory rōpū. And I'm trying to understand what are we saying by supporting this advisory rōpū, because you've also got as well as external rōpū. Koe rata, who are they? Who are these external rōpū that we're talking about here? And how are they going to support this, the two focus areas? Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor, can I just clarify, is the question how will the advisory rōpū support the Toi Māori working group, or how will the Toi Māori, or how the external will support the Toi Māori working group, or all?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to see the relationship here between the Mana Whenua Forum, external rōpū, and elected members and existing council advisory mechanisms. I'm trying to work the relationship between that and the group and its focus area. And it's two focus areas. So I'm just trying to understand that. And who are these external rōpū that are going to be doing this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. So to answer that question, the external rōpū is that there are Toi Māori arts groups, Toi Māori groups established already, and so we want to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts there, that we're enhancing. The reason that they have those two focus areas identified is that's what came out very clearly from Te Taumata's Kōrero series. So because we've also said that we want the shift of embedding Te Tiriti o Waitangi principles in Te Ao Māori to be looked at from the outset, it seemed that it was best placed for that group to work through that. In terms of the mechanics of the interface, I suppose that, to be honest, that's to be confirmed once the group is established. But and we need to make sure that that Toi Māori working group have a strong connection with advisory rōpū, because they're going to be making some strategic decisions. So they need to hear what's coming out from that group with reference to those two areas. But just again, that external rōpū is about the arts organisations or arts networks that are already established within Tamaki Makaurau.
Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, ngā matua. If there's no further part, I just want to acknowledge both of you again, and I'll move into comments, Whakaaro and Councillor Walker, followed by Matua Tony. Councillor Walker, if not, I'll move to Matua Tony. Matua Tony.
Kapai, kia ora. Just to, so my comment is first and foremost, Hannah, appreciate your use of reo and you're trying to pronounce the kupu Māori, because the kupu, our reo is part of the whole toi and our toi whole worldview. So acknowledge that, Hannah, in terms of your kupu Māori use today, and you know, in the words around rōpū and so on. So. But the comment really is around just acknowledge what Councillor Walker is saying. You know, I think in your presentation you've acknowledged the intent to engage, to collaborate, to work in partnership. Although the structure that was put up there still puts council up the top, and to me, partnering doesn't see an organisation up the top. But I guess it's an opportunity, councillors, to council to we've got to put some faith and some trust in our staff that they're saying the right things and they're going to do the right thing. But just note what Councillor Walker is saying around the sector developed. I would have gone for option 3, but I acknowledge what you're saying in terms of the option 2. We've got to start somewhere, put my trust and faith in the staff that are working with some of these significant Māori organisations as well. So I've heard it in your presentation today, the inclusion and working in partnership with iwi. I'd also throw Mātāwaka in there and our toi Māori rōpū, eh? So just wanted to comment on that and say, you know, this is one of those situations where we just got to trust that our staff are going to be on top of this, and all well to you, but don't forget to come back. And also at the Chair, at the renewal of after the elections, we might need to bring this back in terms of our political representation and reappoint or reconfirm if there's no significant change in elected representatives, that political working group. Kia ora.
No, kapai, and that is definitely what's going to happen post the election, Matua. So look, have no issues with that. Councillor Walker, I see you're back on, so I'll go back to you, and then I'll get a comment from Councillor Cooper, and then I'll put the recommendation. Kia ora.
So are we on to comments now, Alf?
Aye.
Okay, so broadly, my comment is entirely supportive of the process. I've watched this process of development over some years now, as it goes to both this strategy, or whatever we want to call it, but also others in other sectors. And I'm hugely conscious that if we want to tap into the resources, the enthusiasm, the passion, everything that this particular sector can bring to bear, they need to have as much ownership of it as possible. I'm acutely conscious that across a whole range of sectors, the council's involvement over time may well diminish, and that may be through funding constraints, through all sorts of constraints. So it's imperative that we not hold up a given sector, and certainly where that sector may actually have challenges with council, may want to go further, faster, better than us, and they may have different ideas, then they should have ownership of that. And again, I say that our place should be to identify those parts where we do have ownership and separate those out, identify those parts so that we can take accountability, responsibility and authority for those parts that relate to us. So I still have concerns, Mr. Chair. I think that the council's role should be around a facilitative function as much as possible, recognising that the sector does have resource constraints, particularly right now. Yes, that's acknowledged, but that does not mean that we should be asserting ourselves to a greater degree. If we identify through some projectisation process that there are some requirements that the sector has that we can facilitate to enhance their ownership, then that is the approach that we should be taking. So I still remain concerned, Mr. Chair, that in the structure, as you look at it, it's going through council. And my experience is that when something goes through council, if the politicians don't like something or whatever else, it just gets dumbed down. And really we need to be going for something that's optimal as far as the sector is concerned. So that is my concern, Mr. Chair. I just want to put that on the table, not only as it goes to this, but a variety of strategies and the like that council has that are often suboptimal in terms of their overall delivery for a sector. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this option because I think it's a good balance, and I think given what's been said, you know, we don't want to go to one extreme or the other. This is a good balance of using our staff's expertise, some elected members' expertise, to support and partner the sector, and also just noting that, you know, sometimes it's great to have out there ideas, but it does need to be tempered by the fact that it's being funded by public money. And I think that's why having that thread of council and the sector working together, those things get, what would I say, made realistic through the process, so there comes to some sort of consensus that can then be presented to councillors for decision. And so, because I think that it's very easy to set up people's expectations with no boundaries at all when we actually do have boundaries. We wouldn't want to be clipping the creativity, but we've got to be able to deliver something that's doable within this, I suppose, the constraints we have, the fiscal constraints we have. So I think this is a really good way to do it. I think it's great if there is that committee and has an independent chair. That's a step away from what we'd normally do. We'd normally have a councillor. So I think that's really great for the sector, but I always like to think that we are the stewards of prudent financial decisions. So thank you. Thanks very much for the work done.
Ka pai. I think to close will be Councillor Hills. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair, and just want to say thank you for this, and it's pretty comprehensive, and just want to also thank the staff who are experts in their field and have worked non-stop, and especially through the last 2 years, pretty closely with our arts organisations and with groups across Tamaki Makaurau, and tried to support and help them through pretty difficult times. And also the communication and engagement between the staff and the sector have been clear that council does not want to be seen as the driver, does not want to be seen as the big bad wolf, does not want to be seen as standing in the way of creativity and change. And that, as far as I know from people I talk to, and including staff, is that this, where we're going, and is about, you know, standing alongside and supporting and doing the bits that often the sector doesn't have time, energy, or money for. So being the glue in some sense, or being the, you know, how we can share services and how we can get things across the sector, how we can get that collaboration, how we can use our and connect with our, you know, council-owned facilities or council-supported facilities, and to link up with, you know, everything else that's going on in the city. So I think it's would be poor if we stepped away and just left everything on its own. It would probably still, you know, everything would carry on, yes. But I think what we are trying to do is be the value add, but also let the sector lead. And that's what I've heard, that there has been a change over the last, you know, 5 to 10 years, that has been the way forward. So I just want to acknowledge the staff for actually, you know, being the experts and understanding and really listening when the sector have said, hey, you're getting in the way, or you're just kind of, you know, the faceless council or whatever, and trying to make sure that that's not how we are seen, and it's about upping the groups that are there. So thank you, Chair, and thank you to the staff. But it is, I do agree that, we've just got to ensure that we're not ever standing in the way or trying to pretend we have all the answers, which I don't believe this is what this is saying at all. So kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora. So it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We'll move on to item 10.